The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. It flows through Jedi Masters and Sith Lords, through the humblest moisture farmer and the mightiest Wookiee warrior. But what happens when something arrives that the Force cannot touch, something that was never meant to exist in this universe at all? What happens when a being forged not by the cosmic energies of creation, but by injection molds and assembly lines in a dimension far beyond the galaxy's edge, tumbles through the impossible spaces between realities and lands in the middle of a war that spans 1,000 star systems? The Battle of Christophilis raged in the void above the crystalline planet's surface. Republic Venator-class star destroyers exchanged turbolaser fire with Separatist frigates, their shields flaring with each impact like dying stars. Clone trooper pilots screamed through the debris field in their V-19 Torrent starfighters, hunting the vulture droids that swarmed like mechanical insects. And in the chaos of that battle, where hyperspace routes converged and overlapped in ways that made navigators nervous, something went wrong with the fabric of reality itself. A hyperspace window opened where none should exist, not the brilliant blue tunnel of a ship's calculated jump, but a ragged purple tear that pulsed with energies no scanner could identify. It existed for precisely 2.3 seconds. Long enough for a small object to tumble through from a backyard universe where the greatest threats were lawn mowers and rain, into a galaxy where planets burned and trillions lived or died based on the decisions of senators and Sith Lords. The Mighty One had been defending his territory against what the larger beings called a garden hose when the world simply changed. One moment he stood atop the overturned trash can lid that served as his fortress, rallying Roxy, Twig, and Leaf for another glorious stand. The next moment, the familiar smells of grass and dirt vanished, replaced by the cold metallic void of space and the overwhelming silence that pressed against his plastic form. He didn't scream. Heroes didn't scream. But his articulated arms windmilled as he tumbled through the void, his painted features locked in their permanent expression of determined heroism even as his mind raced to comprehend the impossibility of his situation. The battle raged around him. Ships larger than entire neighborhoods exchanged fire, explosions blossomed in silent fury, and he was falling toward one of the massive vessels below. The Separatist droid control ship Invincible stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. In the organized chaos of the battle, no one noticed the tiny object that struck the outer hull near one of the maintenance hatches. The Mighty One bounced once. His durable plastic construction absorbing an impact that would have shattered bone, and tumbled into an open vent barely larger than a Ewok's fist. He rolled through darkness, his plastic limbs scraping against metal, until gravity caught him and he dropped into a corridor illuminated by harsh red lighting. The Mighty One landed in a 3-point stance, his pose heroic despite his complete disorientation. The corridor stretched in both directions, far larger than any space he'd ever known. The walls rose 30 feet above him. He was used to being small, but this was different. This was a world built for giants. The floor vibrated with the rhythm of massive engines. Somewhere distant, metallic footsteps echoed in precise, synchronized patterns. The air smelled of ozone, lubricant, and something else, an energy he couldn't identify but that made his plastic skin tingle in ways that shouldn't be possible. Alert! Alert! Hull breach detected in Section 77 Gamma. The voice boomed from speakers built into the ceiling, mechanical and emotionless. Deploying security droids. The Mighty One pressed himself against the base of the wall as a patrol of B-1 battle droids marched past, their vocabulators chattering in tinny voices. Another hull breach? That's the 5th one this cycle. Probably just debris from those Republic cruisers. I hate this job. Roger, Roger. He waited until they passed, then stepped into the corridor center. His mind, sharpened by countless backyard battles, began processing the situation with the efficiency that had made him a leader among the toys. First, he wasn't in the yard anymore. Second, whatever this place was, it was clearly in the middle of some kind of conflict. Third, those walking metal things, some kind of soldiers, maybe, didn't seem very impressive. Fourth, he needed information, allies, and a way to make an impact, because the Mighty One didn't sit on the sidelines waiting to be rescued. He began walking, his small legs carrying him along the base of the wall where shadows offered concealment. The corridor branched and intersected with others, creating a maze that would have overwhelmed most toys. But the Mighty One had navigated the complex territories of the yard. The dense jungle of the flower bed, the treacherous peaks of the woodpile, the deadly no-man's land of the sidewalk. This was just another battlefield with different terrain. A mouse droid scurried past, its sensors focused on its cleaning duties. The Mighty One considered commandeering it but decided against revealing himself yet. Intelligence gathering first. Heroic action second. He rounded a corner and froze. Through a transparent steel viewport, the battle raged in all its terrible glory. Ships the size of mountains exchanged fire. Smaller craft darted between them like insects around giants. And beyond it all, the planet Christophilis hung in space like a jewel, its crystal formations glittering even from orbit. The Mighty One had seen many things in his existence, the terrible majesty of the sprinkler system, the awesome power of the human child who sometimes played with him, the deadly beauty of a sunset reflected in puddle water. But this was war on a scale he'd never imagined. And somehow, impossibly, he was part of it now. A blast rocked the ship. Somewhere close by, metal screamed as it tore. Alarm klaxons wailed. The Mighty One's grip tightened on the small piece of debris he'd picked up. Not much of a weapon, but he'd worked with less. Whatever came next, whatever this strange new world demanded of him, he would face it the same way he'd faced every challenge in the yard. With courage. With leadership. With the absolute certainty that being small didn't mean being powerless. The Force might not touch him, but the Mighty One was about to touch this galaxy in ways no one could predict. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Separatist control ship's reactor core pulsed with energy 3 decks below where the Mighty One crouched behind a severed power coupling. He'd been exploring for what felt like hours, though his internal sense of time, calibrated to backyard days and nights, struggled to adapt to the artificial rhythm of a warship. The vessel shuddered again as another Republic turbolaser volley struck the shields, and sparks rained from damaged conduits overhead. He'd learned much in his reconnaissance. The metal soldiers were called battle droids, and they weren't very bright. Their conversations revealed a war between something called the Separatist Alliance and the Republic, though the Mighty One couldn't yet determine which side, if either, deserved his allegiance. What he did know was that this ship was losing the battle. Badly. AB-1 battle droid stumbled past his hiding spot, one arm hanging loose and sparking. This is a disaster. The Republic's brought in a Jedi, it wailed to its companion. A Jedi. We're all going to be scrap. Calm down, the other droid said, though its voice carried an edge of synthetic panic. General Loathsome has a plan. He always has a plan. His last plan got 3 battalions melted by that Skywalker kid. The Mighty One filed this information away. Jedi. Skywalker. Names that clearly meant something in this world. He waited until the droids rounded a corner, then continued his journey toward what his tactical instincts identified as the ship's critical systems. In the yard, you survived by understanding territory, where the human walked, where the dog couldn't reach, where rain would pool. Here, he needed to understand this metal labyrinth's vulnerabilities. He found what he was looking for in a computer access terminal near the floor, probably meant for maintenance droids. The screen flickered with symbols he couldn't read. No, wait. As he stared, the incomprehensible alien script began to make a strange kind of sense, as if his plastic brain was adapting to process the information. He couldn't explain it, but the Mighty One had learned long ago not to question advantages in combat. His fingers, designed for gripping play weapons in a child's hand. Proved surprisingly adept at manipulating the terminal's lower controls. He pulled up what looked like a schematic. The ship's bridge was marked in red at the top. Engineering in blue at the bottom. And there, highlighted in yellow, was something labeled Escape Pod Bay 7. Before he could explore further, the terminal went dark. Every light in the corridor died simultaneously, plunging him into absolute blackness broken only by emergency lighting that stuttered to life seconds later, bathing everything in crimson. "Attention all battle droids," a voice boomed through the ship's speakers. This voice was different, organic, filled with authority and what the Mighty One recognized as barely controlled fury. "This is General Anakin Skywalker of the Grand Army of the Republic. Your shields are down. Your weapons are offline. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war." The Mighty One had just enough time to process this before he heard something that made every survival instinct he possessed scream in warning. The distinctive snap hiss of an igniting lightsaber, followed by the sounds of metal being carved like the Thanksgiving turkey. He ran. Not in retreat, the Mighty One didn't retreat, but in tactical repositioning toward the source of the commotion. A hero's job was to be where the action was, and clearly, the action had just arrived. He reached an intersection where a maintenance shaft granted him an elevated view of the main corridor below. What he saw defied everything he thought he understood about combat. A young man in brown robes moved through a squad of battle droids like wind through grass. The weapon in his hand, a blade of pure blue energy, hummed as it deflected blaster bolts back at their sources with impossible precision. Droids fell in pieces, their torsos separated from legs, arms spinning away trailing sparks. But what struck the Mighty One most was the expression on the young man's face. Focused, yes, but also tired. Sad, even, despite his devastating effectiveness. Behind him, a teenage girl with orange skin and strange head tails fought with similar grace, her green blade weaving patterns of light and destruction. "Master, the control bridge is 2 levels up," she called out. "I know, Snips," the young man, Skywalker, replied, force pushing 3 droids into the wall with a gesture. "Just keep." He stopped mid-sentence. His head turned slowly, eyes scanning the corridor with sudden intensity. The girl froze too, her blade still raised. "Master? What is it?" "I don't know." Skywalker's brow furrowed. "There's something. I can't sense it in the Force, but it's here. Watching us." The Mighty One's plastic heart, which didn't exist but somehow pounded anyway, hammered in his chest. Could they detect him? He remained perfectly still, using every bit of discipline he'd learned from countless games of "don't let the humans see you move." The girl closed her eyes, her montrals twitching. "I feel it too. Or rather, I feel the absence of it. Like a hole in the Force shaped like something small." A hole in the Force. The Mighty One didn't understand what that meant, but he understood he'd been detected. Time to reassess. He'd learned in the yard that sometimes the best strategy was the direct approach. He stepped to the edge of the maintenance shaft's opening, fully visible in the emergency lighting. The 2 warriors' eyes locked onto him instantly. Lightsabers raised defensively. For a long moment, nobody moved. "Is that," the girl began. "A droid?" Skywalker finished. "But I've never seen a design like that. And why can't I sense it?" The Mighty One understood that appearing non-threatening was crucial. He raised both hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. Then, drawing on every ounce of leadership charisma that had rallied toys in the darkest moments of backyard warfare, he spoke his first words in this new galaxy. "I'm not your enemy." His voice, designed to sound heroic and commanding to beings 3 inches tall, echoed strangely in the vast corridor. But it was clear. Understandable. And apparently shocking, based on how both warriors' eyes widened. Skywalker's lightsaber lowered slightly. "It talks." Ahsoka, have you ever heard of a droid this small with independent speech? Never, Master. And look at its construction, that's not durasteel or even polymer composites. That's, she squinted. I don't even know what that is. The Mighty One seized the moment. I need extraction from this vessel. You appear to be executing an assault. I propose an alliance of mutual benefit. Ahsoka's head-tails twitched with what might have been amusement. Master, did that tiny droid just try to negotiate with us? It did. Skywalker's expression shifted from suspicion to curiosity. He deactivated his lightsaber and crouched down, though even kneeling he towered over the Mighty One like a mountain. Who made you? The Separatists? Republic intelligence? You're like no droid I've ever encountered. I'm not a droid, the Mighty One said firmly. I'm a warrior. And where I come from, I led my people through countless battles. I may be small, but I'm far from helpless. The ship shuddered violently. Somewhere distant, a massive explosion boomed through the hull. Master, we need to move, Ahsoka urged. The reactor's going critical. Skywalker studied the Mighty One for another heartbeat, then made a decision. He extended his hand, palm up. Can you hold on? The Mighty One hesitated. In the yard, accepting help meant admitting weakness. But he'd also learned that good leaders knew when to accept assistance to achieve larger objectives. He stepped onto the massive palm, feeling the warmth of living flesh through his plastic feet. Don't drop me, he said. Skywalker's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Wouldn't dream of it. Come on, Snips. We've got a ship to abandon and apparently a very unusual passenger to bring home. As they ran through the dying vessel, the Mighty One held on and processed his new situation. He'd made first contact with what appeared to be this galaxy's warriors. They were taking him with them, which was good. But they thought he was some kind of advanced machine, which was problematic. And they possessed abilities, moving objects without touching them, sensing presences, that suggested this war was far stranger than anything the Yard had prepared him for. No matter. The Mighty One had faced the incomprehensible before. He'd adapt. He'd learn. And he'd prove that size meant nothing when courage and leadership meant everything. The escape pod bay loomed ahead, and with it, the next chapter of his impossible journey. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant rose like a monument to ancient power, its 5 spires piercing the planet city's perpetual haze of traffic and industry. The Mighty One had never seen anything like it during the shuttle ride from the battle. Buildings stacked upon buildings stretching to every horizon, speeders flowing through the air like rivers of light, billions of beings living in a single incomprehensible metropolis. The Yard suddenly felt very small and very far away. Now he stood in the center of the council chamber, a circular room at the temple's apex where 12 seats arranged in a ring held the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. Stood was perhaps generous. The chamber's floor stretched vast as a parking lot from his perspective, and the council members loomed like statues carved by giants. Their eyes tracked him with varying degrees of curiosity, concern, and suspicion. The Mighty One kept his posture confident, shoulders back, chin raised. Never show weakness. Never show doubt. It had worked in the Yard when facing threats 10 times his size. It would work here. Curious, this one is, Master Yoda said from his seat, his ancient eyes gleaming with interest. Small in stature, yet no droid he is. Feel him in the Force, I cannot. Avoid, he creates. Most unusual. We found him aboard the Separatist control ship during the assault on Christophilis, Anakin explained, standing beside the Mighty One like a tower of flesh and bone. He approached us peacefully, spoke with clear intelligence and self-awareness. His construction is unlike any material we've encountered, some kind of incredibly durable synthetic. Mace Windu leaned forward, his expression carved from stone. You brought an unknown entity of mysterious origin directly to the temple without proper screening? That was reckless, even for you, Skywalker. With respect, Master Windu, what was I supposed to do? Leave him on an exploding Separatist ship? You should have delivered him to Republic intelligence for analysis, Windu replied. This being could be a Separatist weapon. A spy. Something designed specifically to evade force detection. The Mighty One had heard enough. I'm standing right here, he said, his voice projecting across the chamber with the authority he'd used to command toy armies. And I'm neither a weapon nor a spy. I'm a warrior who found himself in your conflict through no choice of my own. Silence fell across the chamber. Several council members exchanged glances. Ki-Adi-Mundi's tall cranium tilted as he studied the tiny figure. It speaks with remarkable confidence for something that could fit in a youngling's pocket. Size matters not, Yoda interjected, and the Mighty One detected something that might have been amusement in the ancient Jedi's tone. Judge him by his size, we should not. Questions, I have. Answer them, will you? I'll answer what I can, the Mighty One replied. But I don't understand this place yet. Where I come from, things were different. Where exactly do you come from? Asked Plo Koon, his mask-filtered voice gentle despite its mechanical quality. How could he explain? The yard, the house, the humans who were like gods, the simple existence of defending territory and leading his friends through adventures that seemed cosmic in scope but took place in spaces measured in feet rather than light years? They'd think him insane. Or worse, they'd think him simple, a toy pretending to be something more. Another dimension, he said finally, choosing truth over deception. I was pulled through some kind of tear in space during your battle. One moment I was defending my territory. The next, I was falling through the void onto that ship. A dimensional rift, Shock T murmured. The hyperspace anomaly near Christophilis. Intelligence reported unusual readings, but we assumed it was Separatist sensor jamming. Obi-Wan Kenobi stroked his beard thoughtfully. If what you say is true, you're remarkably calm for someone torn from their reality and stranded in an entirely alien universe. The Mighty One met his gaze. Panicking doesn't solve problems. Adaptation and leadership do. I've faced existential threats before. This is just another one with higher stakes. Existential threats. Mace Windu's skepticism was palpable. What threats could something your size possibly face? The question stung, but the Mighty One kept his expression neutral. You'd be surprised what threatens you when the entire world is built for beings 100 times your size. Where I come from, a rainstorm could drown you. A lawn mower could end everything. A careless footstep could mean extinction. I learned to lead, to fight, to survive against impossible odds. Your war may be larger, but the principles are the same. Yoda's ears perked up. Wisdom in those words, there is. Understand survival against greater forces, he does. But trust him, should we? The Force cannot guide us regarding this being, Windu said. He exists outside its sight. That alone makes him dangerous. Or it makes him free, Ahsoka interjected from her position near the chamber entrance. Several council members turned to look at her, and she straightened despite their attention. Sorry, Masters, but I was there. He didn't have to reveal himself to us. He could have hidden, escaped, done anything. Instead he made contact, negotiated, and cooperated fully. Those aren't the actions of a threat. Padawan Tano makes a fair point, Obi-Wan acknowledged. Though I share Master Windu's concerns about the convenient timing of this arrival. The Separatists grow desperate. A sophisticated infiltration unit designed to appear harmless would be consistent with their tactics. The Mighty One felt anger rising, not the hot fury that led to mistakes, but the cold determination that had won battles. Test me then. Whatever you need to prove I'm not your enemy. But do it quickly, because I don't intend to sit in this chamber being debated like a piece of equipment while a war rages outside. Aggressive, he is, Yoda observed. But not with darkness. Frustration, I sense. Determination. A warrior's spirit, perhaps. Mace Windu stood, and the movement made the Mighty One's plastic instincts scream danger despite the Jedi's controlled calm. Very well. If you're truly what you claim, a warrior leader from another dimension, then you won't object to demonstrating your capabilities. We have training facilities for younglings. Obstacle courses designed for beings of various sizes. Show us what you can do. The Mighty One's painted features couldn't smile, but his voice carried satisfaction. Gladly. I've been wanting to move since I got here. Master Windu, Anakin said carefully, is it really necessary to? It's fine, the Mighty One interrupted. I understand their caution. In their position, I'd demand the same. Besides, he turned his head to regard the assembled council with the same confidence he'd shown facing down the garden hose. I could use the exercise. 20 minutes later, the Mighty One stood at the entrance to a training chamber deep within the temple's lower levels. The course before him had been designed for younglings, children training to become Jedi, and featured obstacles scaled appropriately for small beings. Platforms to jump between. Barriers to climb. Moving obstacles to avoid. At his toy size, it was still monumental. Anakin crouched beside him, having volunteered to oversee the trial. You don't have to prove anything, you know. The council can be rigid sometimes. But they're not unreasonable. I have everything to prove, the Mighty One replied. I'm a stranger in your world. Until I prove my worth, I'm just a curiosity. And I didn't survive everything I've survived by being just a curiosity. What did you survive? Really? The Mighty One considered the question. How to explain the primal terror of the sprinkler's apocalyptic deluge? The organized chaos of defending against the human child's destructive play. The philosophical complexity of determining whether they were toys brought to life or living beings shaped like toys. Enough to know that underestimating your enemy gets you killed, he said finally. And enough to know that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest weapon you have. Anakin's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. All right then, warrior. Show them what you've got. The Mighty One stepped into the training chamber. Above, in an observation gallery, the council watched. He could feel their eyes. And more, could feel the strange absence where their force perception simply ended when it touched him. A void in their awareness. Good. Let them see what a void could do. The first obstacle was a gap between platforms, easily 6 feet wide from his perspective, the equivalent of a human jumping across a small chasm. The Mighty One didn't hesitate. He ran, his plastic legs pumping, and leaped. For a heartbeat he flew, and then his hands caught the far edge. He pulled himself up with the same efficient movement he'd used 1,000 times climbing the woodpile. The next challenge came faster, a series of moving barriers that swept across the course at regular intervals. He timed them, calculated the pattern, and moved through the gaps with precision that came from navigating a world where timing meant the difference between safety and being spotted by the humans. A climbing wall loomed ahead, its surface dotted with handholds. The Mighty One attacked it without pause, his durable plastic fingers gripping holds that would have cut living flesh. He ascended like a spider, never stopping, never doubting. At the top, a balance beam stretched across a pit filled with training foam. He walked it like a tightrope, arms extended, center of gravity perfect despite the beam being barely wider than his foot. In the observation gallery, Yoda's ears lifted. Impressive, this is. Skill and courage, he shows. No force ability, yet succeeds through will and training. Mace Windu's expression remained neutral, but he nodded slowly. He moves like someone who's fought for survival. There's efficiency there. Purpose. Below, the Mighty One dropped from the balance beam and found himself facing the course's final challenge, a vertical shaft with handholds spiraling upward, designed to test a youngling's ability to maintain focus while climbing. From his perspective, it was like ascending a skyscraper's interior. He jumped, caught the first hold, and began to climb. Up and up, hand over hand, never looking down. His plastic muscles, which shouldn't have muscles but somehow did when needed, burned with effort that was more memory of limitation than actual fatigue. Higher. Higher. Until finally his hand gripped the top edge and he pulled himself onto the final platform. A small bell hung there, scaled for tiny hands. The mighty one grabbed the cord and rang it, the clear tone echoing through the chamber. From below, Anakin Skywalker began to clap. After a moment, Ahsoka joined him, her applause echoing up the shaft. And in the gallery above, even Mace Windu looked impressed. The mighty one stood atop the platform, breathing hard despite not needing breath, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd proven what he needed to prove, that he was real, capable, and worthy of respect. But as he looked out at the training chamber, at the Jedi watching him, at the impossible reality of this galaxy-spanning civilization, one thought dominated his plastic mind: now what? He was trapped in a universe at war, far from everything he'd known, unable to go home. The only path forward was the one he'd always taken: adapt, lead, survive, and make a difference where he stood. The Council would have to decide if they could trust him. But the Mighty One had already decided he would find a way to matter in this galaxy, whether they helped him or not. 3 days after the training demonstration, the Mighty One found himself in a briefing room that smelled of CAF and recycled air, surrounded by holographic star charts that made his plastic head spin. The Jedi Council had deliberated, debated, and finally reached a conclusion that Master Windu had delivered with his characteristic directness: "We don't trust you completely, but we trust you enough not to lock you in a containment cell." Congratulations. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but the Mighty One would take it. Now Anakin Skywalker stood before a tactical display showing a planet called Raxus, its surface dotted with mountains of salvaged starship parts and industrial complexes. Republic intelligence intercepted Separatist communications suggesting they're building something in this facility. He highlighted a structure half buried in a canyon of scrap metal. We don't know what, but the encryption on those transmissions was higher than anything we've seen outside of direct military operations. Could be a new weapons platform, suggested Commander Cody, his white and orange armor gleaming under the briefing room's lights. Or another droid factory. They've been ramping up production since we hit their supply lines at Felucia. Or it could be a trap, Obi-Wan added from his position across the holodeck. Raxus is deep in Separatist territory. Any insertion team would be operating without support. The Mighty One had been listening from his position on the holodeck's edge, studying the facility's schematics. The others had grown accustomed to his presence over the past 3 days, a strange adjustment period where he'd proven useful in small ways. His size allowed him to access maintenance tunnels and ventilation systems. His outsider perspective occasionally offered insights that beings raised in this galaxy missed. And his confidence, once seen as arrogance, had been reframed as competence after the training demonstration. "The facility has ventilation systems," he said, pointing to the schematic. "Look at the intake vents along the northern wall. They're standard atmospheric processing units, probably 30 centimeters in diameter. Too small for any of you to use, but I could infiltrate through them." Anakin turned, eyebrows raised. "You want to volunteer for an intelligence-gathering mission into the heart of Separatist space?" "I want to be useful," the Mighty One corrected. "You've given me shelter and haven't treated me as a prisoner despite your suspicions. That deserves repayment." Besides, his voice carried an edge of frustration. "I'm tired of sitting in the temple while a war happens outside. Where I come from, leaders don't hide while their people fight." "You barely understand our conflict," Obi-Wan pointed out, though his tone held more curiosity than criticism. "The Republic and Separatists, the Jedi and Sith, the clone armies, all of this must seem incredibly alien to you." "It does," the Mighty One admitted. But I understand the basics. There's a war. People are dying. And one side is led by beings who believe in protecting others, while the other side is led by those who want power and control. The details may be complicated, but the fundamentals aren't that different from conflicts I've seen. Ahsoka, who had been studying him with barely concealed fascination since the Council's verdict, leaned forward. What conflicts? You keep mentioning your past like you've fought in wars, but you're she caught herself. A toy. The Mighty One finished. I know what I am. Where I come from, I was created to be a child's plaything. But I'm also alive, aware, and capable of making choices. I led others through battles that were life and death to us, even if they would seem trivial to you. Territory disputes. Resource allocation. Defense against existential environmental threats. Scale it up to your level, and it's not that different. The room fell quiet. Commander Cody broke the silence, his voice thoughtful behind his helmet. Sir, permission to speak freely. Granted, Anakin said. The little guy has a point. We need intelligence on that facility. Regular infiltration would require a full commando team and probably trigger every alarm in the complex. But something his size? The Separatists wouldn't even have sensors calibrated to detect him. He could walk right past their security. It's incredibly dangerous, Obi-Wan objected. If he's discovered, we have no way to extract him. And we can't guarantee his survival if things go wrong. The Mighty One felt something he recognized from the yard. The moment when others debated your fate while you stood right there, as if you had no agency in your own story. I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can contribute to something larger than myself. You can debate the wisdom all you want, but ultimately the decision is mine. I volunteer. Anakin and Obi-Wan exchanged a look that communicated years of partnership and mutual understanding. Finally, Anakin sighed. All right. But you don't go alone. Ahsoka and I will insert via stealth shuttle and hold position outside the facility. You infiltrate, gather what intel you can, and we extract you before the Separatists know we were there. Master, are you sure about this? Ahsoka asked. No, Anakin admitted. But he's right, we need to know what they're building. And I've learned to trust my instincts. Something tells me our small friend here is more capable than he appears. 4 hours later, the Mighty One crouched in the cargo hold of a stealth-modified Eta-class shuttle as it descended through Raxus's atmosphere. Through the viewport, he could see the planet's surface, a graveyard of starships stretching to every horizon, mountains of metal and salvage that dwarfed anything he'd known in the yard. Ahsoka sat across from him, checking her lightsabers for the third time. Nervous? She asked. Focused, he replied. Nervousness is just preparation looking for direction. She smiled. That's very Jedi of you. Are you sure you can't touch the Force? Because sometimes you sound like Master Yoda. I don't even know what the Force is. Not really. You all talk about it like it's this energy field that connects everything, but I've never felt it. Maybe whatever I'm made of is incompatible. Maybe toys don't have midichlorians or whatever makes you special. The Force isn't what makes us special, Ahsoka said quietly. Being connected to it is a gift, but I've met plenty of Force sensitives who were terrible people. And I've met non-sensitives who showed more courage and wisdom than some Jedi Masters. The Force is a tool. What matters is what you choose to do. The Mighty One considered this. In the yard, he'd never had abilities beyond his durability and leadership. He'd made do with what he had. Maybe this galaxy wasn't so different after all. Approaching drop zone, Anakin called from the pilot's seat. Mighty One, you ready? Always. He moved to the shuttle's boarding ramp, checking the small communicator they'd attached to his chest, scaled-down Republic technology that barely qualified as functional at his size, but it would let him maintain contact. The shuttle descended behind a ridge of scrap metal, landing thrusters engaging just long enough to settle into a concealed position 300 meters from the facility. The boarding ramp lowered, and the Mighty One stood at its edge, looking out at the landscape of industrial waste and the fortress-like structure in the distance. "Remember," Anakin said, kneeling beside the ramp, "get in, find out what they're building, get out. No heroics. No unnecessary risks." The Mighty One nodded. "I'll be back before you finish meditating or whatever it is Jedi do while they wait." He jumped from the ramp, a fall of perhaps 10 feet from his perspective, and landed in the dusty scrap-strewn ground. The shuttle's ramp closed behind him, and suddenly he was alone in hostile territory with nothing but his wits and his indestructible plastic body. He started running toward the facility, using the scattered debris for cover. At his scale, the journey was epic, navigating around discarded hull plating the size of houses, climbing over conduits that stretched like fallen trees, crossing gaps in the terrain that required careful jumps. 20 minutes of hard travel brought him to the facility's perimeter. Security droids patrolled in predictable patterns, their sensors sweeping for Republic forces and completely missing the tiny figure that slipped between their legs. The Mighty One found the ventilation intake exactly where the schematics had shown it, a grated opening set into the wall, protected by a magnetic lock that meant nothing when you were small enough to slip between the gratings bars. Inside, the ventilation shaft stretched like a tunnel carved from metal. The airflow pulled at him, but his low center of gravity and durable construction let him press forward. He'd navigated worse. The wind tunnel effect of the closed dryer vent in the yard had been far more intense. The shaft branched and split, but the Mighty One followed the largest airflow toward what he assumed was the facility's center. Through grates in the floor of the shaft, he glimpsed assembly lines where battle droids worked on something. His angle was wrong to see clearly. He needed to get lower. A junction ahead offered a vertical shaft leading down. The Mighty One braced himself against the walls and descended, his plastic hands and feet finding purchase on the metal surface. Down he went, into the heart of the facility, into whatever secret the Separatists were building. And what he found there, when he finally reached a grate that offered a clear view of the assembly floor, made his plastic heart, which still shouldn't exist, skip a beat. They weren't building weapons. They weren't building droids. They were building a ship. But not just any ship, a vessel the size of a Republic cruiser, its hull bristling with strange protrusions that looked like nothing in the Republic's database. And at its heart, visible through the incomplete superstructure, was a massive crystal that pulsed with sickly green energy. The Mighty One activated his communicator. "Skywalker, are you reading this?" Static crackled for a moment, then Anakin's voice came through. "We're here. What did you find?" "I found your answer," the Mighty One replied, staring at the terrible construction below. "And it's worse than you thought." The assembly floor stretched beneath the ventilation grate like a cathedral dedicated to industrial warfare. The Mighty One pressed himself against the metal slats, recording everything with the microcamera attachment the Republic technicians had hastily integrated into his communicator. Below, B-1 battle droids moved in coordinated patterns around the massive ship, their spot welders throwing sparks that danced like imprisoned stars. "Describe what you're seeing," Anakin's voice crackled through the comm, tense with controlled urgency. "A ship. Capital class by your standards, maybe 400 meters bow to stern. The hull configuration doesn't match anything from your database files. It's got these protruding weapons arrays that look almost organic, like they grew rather than were built." The Mighty One adjusted his position to get a better angle on the crystal at the ship's core. "But the real problem is what's powering it. There's a crystal, massive, maybe 20 meters tall. It's pulsing with green energy and I can feel it from here." "Feel it?" Ahsoka's voice cut in. "Feel it how?" The Mighty One struggled to articulate the sensation. It was like static electricity, but deeper, a vibration that resonated through his plastic form in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Like it's pushing against me. Like it wants me to notice it. Is that what your force feels like?" A pause on the other end. Then Obi-Wan's voice joined the comm channel, apparently having been patched in. That's very much not what the Force feels like. Can you get a closer look at the crystal without being detected? The Mighty One studied the layout below. A catwalk ran along the chamber's wall, approximately level with his current position. If he could reach it, he could traverse closer to the ship's exposed interior. Give me 5 minutes. He didn't wait for approval. Leaders didn't ask permission when the mission demanded action. The grate lifted easily, no locks at this height, since who would expect infiltration through ventilation systems this small? The Mighty One emerged onto a narrow maintenance ledge, the drop to the assembly floor dizzyingly far below. At his scale, it was like standing atop a skyscraper looking down at the street. The catwalk beckoned 20 feet away. Too far to jump. But a power conduit ran along the wall, its cabling offering handholds. The Mighty One had climbed worse. He'd scaled the rain gutter during the Great Flood, when water had threatened to wash away the entire yard crew. This was just metal and determination. He grabbed the conduit and began traversing hand over hand, his plastic fingers gripping with a strength that still surprised him. Below, battle droids continued their work, oblivious. A supervisor droid. A tactical unit with more sophisticated sensors, paused in its patrol, its head swiveling upward as if it had detected something. The Mighty One froze, becoming absolutely still. It was a technique perfected during countless near discoveries by the humans. Don't move. Don't breathe. Become part of the environment. The tactical droid sensors swept past him. After 10 seconds that felt like an eternity, it resumed its patrol route. The Mighty One continued his traverse and finally reached the catwalk, pulling himself onto its surface with silent efficiency. From here, he had a clear view of the ship's interior through the incomplete hull sections. The crystal dominated everything. Up close, the pulsing energy was hypnotic, rhythmic waves of sickly green light that washed across the assembly floor in slow cycles. But more disturbing were the figures working around it. Not droids. Living beings in environmental suits, their movements careful and ritualistic. I've got a better view, the Mighty One whispered into the comm. There are organics down there. They're doing something to the crystal. Looks like they're inscribing it. There are symbols appearing on its surface. Sith runes, Obi-Wan said immediately, his voice grim. This isn't just Separatist technology. The dark side of the Force is involved. Before the Mighty One could respond, one of the suited figures below removed their helmet. Even from this distance, he recognized the species from the database files he'd studied. A Geonosian, its insectoid features unmistakable. But its eyes glowed with the same sickly green as the crystal, and when it spoke, its voice carried across the chamber with unnatural resonance. The synthesis nears completion. Soon the weapon will channel the dark side itself, and no Republic shield will withstand its power. Count Dooku will be pleased. Another figure emerged from the shadows near the crystal's base. This one wore the flowing robes the Mighty One had learned to associate with Force users, but where Jedi moved with grace, this being radiated menace. Even without understanding the Force, the Mighty One recognized predatory threat when he saw it. Dooku's pleasure is irrelevant, the robed figure said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. Lord Sidious commands this project. The crystal will serve its purpose, to crack Republic morale as we demonstrate that even their precious Jedi cannot stand against weaponized darkness. The Mighty One's tactical mind processed this information rapidly. A weapon powered by this dark side energy. Important enough for beings called Dooku and Sidious to personally oversee. Capable of breaking through Republic defenses. This wasn't just intelligence gathering anymore. This was a game changer. Did you get that? He whispered into the comm. Every word, Anakin replied, and the anger in his voice was barely controlled. We need to destroy that crystal before they can deploy it. Negative, Skywalker, Obi-Wan countered. We need to extract our operative and report this to the Council. We're 3 Jedi in a, he paused, and our unique ally against an entire facility. Tactical retreat is the only logical option. The Mighty One knew Obi-Wan was right from a purely strategic standpoint. In the yard, he'd advocated for tactical withdrawal plenty of times when the odds were impossible. But he'd also learned that sometimes impossible odds were all you got, and waiting for better circumstances meant the enemy got stronger. There might be another option, he said quietly, studying the chamber's layout. That crystal is the keystone of the entire project. If it's destroyed, they'd have to start over, assuming they could even find another one. Agreed, Anakin said immediately. But how do we destroy it? We'd never make it through their security too. You wouldn't, the Mighty One interrupted. But I might. Look at the power conduits feeding into the crystal's containment field. They're generating a magnetic bottle to keep the energy controlled, right? What happens if that containment fails? Silence on the comm. Then Obi-Wan spoke, his voice carrying reluctant understanding. The crystal's energy would likely cascade uncontrollably. It could destroy the entire facility. And you'd be caught in the blast radius, Ahsoka added, alarm clear in her voice. You can't survive that. The Mighty One considered his own durability. He'd survived being run over by bicycles, crushed under falling flower pots, blasted by the garden hoses full pressure. His plastic construction was nearly indestructible by the standards of his original world. But an explosion fueled by this dark side energy? That was an unknown variable. Maybe I can't, he admitted. But someone has to try. That weapon could kill thousands, maybe millions of your people. Against that, one toy warrior seems like an acceptable trade. Absolutely not, Anakin said firmly. We don't sacrifice people. We find another way. There isn't time for another way, the Mighty One countered. He'd already made his decision. This was what leaders did, made the hard calls when no one else would. I'm already in position. I've got access to the conduits. And I'm expendable in a way you 3 aren't. You're not expendable, Ahsoka insisted. Master, tell him. But before she could finish, the tactical droid from earlier appeared at the far end of the catwalk, its photoreceptors locking onto the Mighty One with sudden, terrible certainty. Intruder detected. Its vocabulator screeched the alarm. Security breach on level 7. Initiate lockdown protocols. Klaxons wailed. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red. The robed figure near the crystal spun toward the catwalk, and the Mighty One felt something he'd never experienced before. A pressure against his mind, like invisible fingers trying to crush his consciousness. But whatever he was made of, whatever strange material comprised his being, it didn't respond to the force. The mental assault slid off him like water off plastic. The robed figure's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. What manner of creature? The Mighty One didn't give him time to finish. He ran, sprinting along the catwalk toward the power conduits that fed the crystal's containment. Battle droids were already scrambling up access ladders from the assembly floor. Blaster fire ionized the air around him, bolts scorching the metal catwalk but missing his small, fast-moving form. Get out of there. Anakin shouted through the comm. Negative, the Mighty One replied, reaching the first conduit junction. The connection points were sealed with electromagnetic locks, but at his scale, he could slip through the maintenance access panels. I'm finishing this. He squeezed through the gap and found himself inside the conduit housing, surrounded by crackling energy feeds that made his plastic skin tingle. The control node sat before him like a small altar, its surface covered in readouts and manual override switches designed for droid maintenance workers. The Mighty One had no idea how Separatist technology worked. But he understood the universal principle: complex systems had simple failure points. He grabbed the largest power coupling he could reach and pulled. Sparks erupted. Alarms shrieked. The coupling came free with a shower of electrical discharge that would have killed any organic being but merely made his plastic surface smoke slightly. On the assembly floor, the crystal's pulsing rhythm stuttered. The green energy flickered, dimmed, then surged brighter as the containment field destabilized. Containment failure. One of the suited figures screamed. Evacuate. Evacuate now. The robed Force user raised his hands, attempting to stabilize the crystal through sheer willpower. For a moment it seemed to work, the energy pulled back, compressed. But the Mighty One had already moved to the second conduit, ripping through connections with the efficiency of someone who dismantled countless complex structures in the yard. The crystal's energy exploded outward in a wave of green fire. The robed figure screamed as it consumed him. Battle droids melted where they stood. The massive ship's incomplete hull began to glow white-hot. The Mighty One felt the heat even through the conduit housing. Time to go. He burst back onto the catwalk to find it half-melted, sagging under its own weight. The drop to the assembly floor was impossible to survive, even for him. But ahead, through the smoke and chaos, he spotted a cargo loading door cycling open as droids attempted to escape. He ran. Behind him, the crystal's energy built toward critical mass. The catwalk gave way beneath his feet and he jumped, caught a dangling cable, swung, and flew through the air toward the opening cargo door as the world turned green and white behind him. He hit the ground outside rolling, came up running, and didn't stop until he'd put 200 meters between himself and the facility. Then the crystal detonated. The explosion lit up Raxus's sky like a newborn sun, green energy mushrooming upward in a pillar that could probably be seen from orbit. The shockwave knocked the Mighty One tumbling, but his durable form absorbed the impact. When he finally stopped rolling and looked back, the facility was simply gone. A crater remained, still glowing with residual dark side energy. Mighty One. Ahsoka's voice crackled through the calm, Mighty One, respond. He activated the transmitter with shaking hands. I'm here. Mission accomplished. The crystal is destroyed. You crazy, magnificent little warrior, Anakin breathed. We saw the explosion. We thought, stay where you are. We're coming to get you. The Mighty One sat in the dust and debris, watching the smoke rise from the crater. He'd survived. Against all odds, against an energy that could disintegrate battle droids, he'd survived and completed the mission. But as the adrenaline faded, one thought dominated his mind: he'd just killed beings. Destroyed them without hesitation because the mission demanded it. In the yard, battles had never been lethal. Here, war meant death. He'd crossed a line today. There was no going back to what he'd been. The shuttle's engines grew louder as it approached for extraction, but the Mighty One barely heard it. He was too busy realizing that he'd just become exactly what this galaxy needed him to be. A soldier. The Republic military base on Kamino existed in a state of perpetual rain, droplets hammering against the sprawling facility's white structures like bullets from the sky. The Mighty One stood at a viewport in the barracks level, watching water stream down the transparisteel in rivers that would have swept him away if he'd been outside. It had been 2 weeks since Raxus, and he still wasn't sure how he felt about what he'd done. The mission had been deemed a spectacular success. The destruction of the dark side weapon had set back Separatist plans by months, maybe years. Republic intelligence confirmed that Count Dooku himself had visited the crater site, reportedly furious at the loss. The Mighty One had been commended, even grudgingly praised by Master Windu. But commendations didn't erase the memory of beings screaming as the crystal's energy consumed them. "You're brooding again," said a voice behind him. The Mighty One turned to find Captain Rex approaching, his blue-striped armor gleaming under the barracks lights. The clone officer had become something of an unexpected ally, perhaps because Rex understood what it meant to be created for a specific purpose and then asked to become something more. "I'm thinking," the Mighty One corrected. "There's a difference." "Not much of one, in my experience." Rex crouched down, bringing his helmeted head closer to the Mighty One's level. It was a gesture of respect the clone always made, rather than towering over him. You did what had to be done on Raxus. No one's questioning that. I'm questioning it. Good, Rex said simply. The day you stop questioning whether killing is necessary is the day you stop being a soldier and become a droid. We've got enough of those on both sides already. The Mighty One appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't resolve his internal conflict. In the yard, leadership had meant protecting others, defending territory, inspiring courage. Here, it meant making choices that resulted in death. The scale was different, but the weight was the same. A group of clone troopers entered the barracks, their white armor marked with the blue and white of the 501st Legion, Anakin's unit. They moved in the synchronized way the Mighty One had learned to recognize, each step identical despite these being individual beings. Or were they? The question haunted him. Captain Rex, sir, one of them said, snapping to attention. General Skywalker requests your presence in the briefing room. And he wants he wants our special operative to attend as well. The trooper's hesitation was understandable. The clones didn't know what to call the Mighty One. Droid was inaccurate. Civilian didn't fit someone who destroyed an enemy facility. Soldier seemed presumptuous for something that stood 4 inches tall. So they settled for various euphemisms, growing more creative as the days passed. Tell the general we're on our way, Rex replied. He stood and offered his hand, palm up. It had become their standard mode of transportation through the base. The Mighty One riding in Rex's palm rather than attempting to navigate corridors where a single careless boot could end him. The briefing room was packed when they arrived. Anakin stood at the holodeable alongside Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Commander Cody. But what caught the Mighty One's attention were the other figures present, a dozen clone troopers, including several with specialized armor configurations he'd learned to identify. Heavy weapons specialists. Demolitions experts. And 4 clones with distinctive markings, red and white armor, more individualized than standard issue. Ah, there you are, Anakin said as Rex set the Mighty One on the holodable's edge. I believe some introductions are in order. Mighty One, meet Clone Force 99. Better known as the Bad Batch. Hunter, Wrecker, Tech, and Crosshair. The clone called Hunter stepped forward, his modified helmet sporting a red bandana-like attachment. So you're the tiny operative who's been causing all the fuss. Gotta say, the reports made you sound a lot bigger. And the reports made you sound a lot more impressive, the Mighty One replied evenly. Guess we're both dealing with exaggerated reputations. Wrecker, a massive clone who looked like he could punch through Durasteel, barked a laugh. Oh, I like this one. He's got spirit. Spirit won't help with the mission, said Crosshair, the lanky sharpshooter whose voice carried perpetual skepticism. We're being asked to insert into Separatist space with a toy as our intel asset. How is that sound tactics? Because that toy destroyed an entire enemy facility single-handedly, Ahsoka interjected, her tone sharp. Which is more than you've accomplished this month. The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. The Mighty One recognized the dynamic immediately, elite specialists who prided themselves on being different, being better, now forced to work with something they considered beneath their standards. He'd faced similar attitudes in the yard when new toys arrived and had to prove themselves. Enough, Obi-Wan said calmly but firmly. We're here because Republic intelligence has identified a priority target on Kamino itself. This facility. The holodable display shifted to show a section of Kamino's cloning facilities the Mighty One hadn't seen before, a isolated complex separated from the main production centers by kilometers of ocean platform. What is it? Rex asked. We don't know, Obi-Wan admitted. That's the problem. It's listed in Kaminoan records as a specialized development center, but access is restricted even to Jedi oversight. The Kaminoans claim it's simply a research facility for improving clone production efficiency. But you don't believe them, the Mighty One said. It wasn't a question. We don't, Anakin confirmed. Not after discovering that the Kaminoans have been less than forthcoming about certain aspects of clone programming. The inhibitor chips, for instance. The Mighty One had heard whispers about this. Organic control chips implanted in every clone's brain, ostensibly to ensure behavioral compliance but with darker potential purposes. The clones in the room shifted uncomfortably at the mention. You think this facility is connected to the chips? Rex asked, his voice carefully neutral. We think it's connected to something the Kaminoans don't want us to see, Obi-Wan replied. Which means we need someone who can infiltrate without triggering their security. Someone small enough to access areas designed only for Kaminoan technicians. All eyes turned to the Mighty One. You want me to spy on the people who created your entire army, he said slowly. The beings who've been your allies since the war began. We want you to find the truth, Anakin corrected. If the facility is innocent research, we verify that and move on. If it's something else, he left the implication hanging. The Mighty One studied the clone troopers in the room. Rex. Cody. The Bad Batch. All of them created beings, manufactured in these very facilities for the purpose of fighting a war they'd never chosen. Suddenly his existence as a toy designed for a child's entertainment seemed almost privileged by comparison. At least he'd been built for joy rather than death. What aren't you telling me? He asked. Obi-Wan and Anakin exchanged a glance. Then Obi-Wan spoke. We have reason to believe this facility may be creating specialized clones. Prototypes with enhanced capabilities and possibly altered loyalty programming. If true, it represents a massive security breach. The Kaminoans could be developing soldiers loyal to someone other than the Republic. Or they could be developing clones without inhibitor chips, Tech interjected, the Bad Batch's technical specialist adjusting his specialized goggles. Which would make them unpredictable variables in the Grand Army's operational structure. The Mighty One absorbed this information. You're asking me to potentially expose a conspiracy that could undermine your entire military force. And you're asking me to do it surrounded by people who might be the very ones compromised by whatever's happening in that facility. We're asking you because you're the only one we're absolutely certain isn't compromised, Anakin said quietly. You're not Republic. You're not Separatist. You're not even from this galaxy. You're outside every system of control and influence that exists here. That makes you the most trustworthy operative we have for this mission. It was a strange compliment, being trusted because he didn't belong. But the Mighty One understood the logic. When do we start? He asked. 4 hours later, the Mighty One crouched inside a ventilation duct overlooking the mysterious facility's main laboratory. Getting here had required Rex and Hunter to create a distraction, a faked maintenance emergency that drew Kaminoan supervisors away from their monitoring stations long enough for the infiltration. The laboratory below was pristine white, as was everything on Kamino, but the equipment looked different from the standard cloning facilities. Less organic, more mechanical. And the tanks lining the walls didn't contain developing clone embryos. They contained fully grown clones in suspended animation. The Mighty One activated his comm in whisper mode. I'm in position. You're not going to like what I'm seeing. Report, Obi-Wan's voice crackled back. There are clones here. Adults. Maybe 50 of them in stasis tanks. But they're different, taller than standard, more muscular, and their armor, he focused on the equipment racks beside each tank. Their armor is black. Not clone trooper white. Black with red markings. Static silence. Then, can you get identification numbers? The Mighty One studied the tanks more carefully. Each one had a designation plate, but the numbers were longer than standard clone identifiers. The format's wrong. These aren't CT designations. They're RC. What does RC mean? Republic Commando, Rex's voice cut in, tense with recognition. Elite Special Forces units. But we already have commando battalions. Why would the Kaminoans be growing more in secret? Before anyone could answer, a door hissed open. The Mighty One pressed himself flat against the ventilation grate as two Kaminoans entered, their elongated necks and large eyes giving them an unsettling appearance even after 2 weeks of seeing them around the base. "The new batch shows promising results," one said in a species characteristic soft voice. "Enhanced aggression protocols are integrating well with the inhibitor chip modifications." "And their loyalty programming?" the second asked. "Absolute. When Order 66 is initiated, these units will execute Jedi targets with 98% efficiency, compared to the standard clone's estimated 73%. The Mighty One's plastic body went rigid. Order 66. Execute Jedi targets. Every word was a hammer blow. "The Sith Lord will be pleased," the first Kaminoan continued. "Lord Tyrannus's investment in this program has—" "Careful," the second interrupted. "Even here, such names should not be spoken. The Jedi must suspect nothing until the moment of activation." They moved deeper into the laboratory, their conversation fading. But the Mighty One had heard enough. His comm was still transmitting. On the other end, he could imagine the expressions of those listening: Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and worst of all, the clone troopers who just learned they were programmed weapons aimed at their Jedi generals. "Did you?" Rex's voice was barely a whisper. "Did you all hear that?" "Every word," Obi-Wan replied, and his tone carried the weight of a galaxy collapsing. "Mighty One, can you access their computer systems? We need proof. We need everything they have on this Order 66. The Mighty One was already moving, crawling through the ventilation system toward the laboratory's data terminal. This had stopped being a simple intelligence mission. This was the discovery that could save or destroy everything the Republic believed in. And once again, the galaxy's smallest warrior found himself at the center of its largest crisis. He reached the terminal and dropped down to its keyboard, his small hands already moving across the interface. Whatever happened next, whatever revelation awaited in these files, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The data terminal's screen cast a blue glow across the Mighty One's plastic features as his fingers worked the keys with practiced efficiency. The Kaminoans had left the station unlocked, overconfident in their security, assuming no one could access this isolated facility. They hadn't counted on someone small enough to slip through their defenses like water through cracks. Files scrolled past. Personnel records. Production schedules. Genetic modification protocols. And then, buried 3 subdirectories deep, he found it, a folder labeled simply, Contingency Orders, Eyes Only. His hands hesitated over the keyboard. Opening this file would change everything. The clone troopers listening on the comm, the Jedi who trusted them, the entire structure of the Republic's military, all of it hung in the balance of whatever information waited behind that digital lock. "I found something," he whispered into the comm, Contingency Orders. "It's encrypted, but I might be able to." "Do it," Anakin said immediately. "We need to know." The Mighty One activated the decryption subroutine Tech had uploaded to his comm unit before the mission. Numbers cascaded across the screen as the program worked, each second feeling like an hour. In the laboratory below, the Kaminoans continued their inspection of the stasis tanks, oblivious to the espionage happening meters above their heads. The encryption broke. The file opened. What the Mighty One saw made his plastic form go cold despite the impossibility of that sensation. The document was clinical, sterile in its language, but its content was monstrous. 150 contingency orders, each one a predetermined command that could be activated through the clone troopers' inhibitor chips. Most were standard military protocols, emergency defense measures, rules of engagement, chain of command procedures. But Order 66 stood out like a cancer among the others. In the event of Jedi officers acting against the interests of the Republic, and after receiving specific orders verified as coming from the Supreme Chancellor, commanders will remove those officers by lethal force, and command of the Grand Army of the Republic will revert to the Supreme Chancellor until a new command structure is established. The Mighty One's voice was steady despite the horror of what he was reading. I'm downloading everything. Order 66 is real. It's pre-programmed into every clone. A single command from the Chancellor and the entire clone army turns on the Jedi. The comm channel erupted. Rex's voice, raw with betrayal, we're weapons. We've always been weapons aimed at you. Ahsoka, trying to maintain calm, Rex, it's not your fault. You didn't know. Cody, his usual composure cracking, how many Jedi have we served alongside? How many have saved our lives? And we're programmed to kill them? Everyone stay focused, Obi-Wan commanded, though his voice carried unprecedented strain. Mighty One, can you determine who has the authority to activate these orders? The Mighty One scrolled through the authorization protocols. According to this, only the Supreme Chancellor can issue the command. It requires both a verbal code phrase and a biometric confirmation. But there's a notation here. He zoomed in on a line of text half hidden in the technical specifications. There's a secondary activation pathway. Someone with the designation, Sith Command, can override even the Chancellor's authority. Silence. Then Anakin, his voice tight with realization, Palpatine. It has to be. The Supreme Chancellor is the Sith Lord. That's why Dooku called his master, Sidious. That's why the Separatists always seem to know our strategies. Palpatine is playing both sides. That's treason, Skywalker, Cody said automatically, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. Accusing the Chancellor is exactly what we need to do, Obi-Wan interrupted. But we need more than speculation. Mighty One, is there anything in those files that directly connects Palpatine to the Sith or to this conspiracy? The Mighty One searched through the downloaded data, his small fingers flying across the keyboard. The Kaminoans below had finished their inspection and were moving toward the door. He had maybe 30 seconds before they might notice the active terminal. There. Buried in the financial records. Payments for the secret commando program, traced through a dozen shell corporations, but ultimately funded by accounts linked to a Sith Lord named Tyrannus. And a note, per agreement with Lord Sidious, facilitate all requests from Supreme Chancellor Palpatine regarding special projects. I've got it, the Mighty One said. Financial records connecting Palpatine to the Sith Lords. The conspiracy goes all the way to the top. The entire war. A massive hand grabbed him from behind. The Mighty One twisted, trying to break free, but the grip was unyielding. He found himself staring into the face of one of the black-armored clones from the stasis tanks. The commando's eyes were open but empty, pupils dilated with whatever chemical cocktail the Kaminoans used to control their specialized soldiers. Intruder detected, the commando said in a monotone voice. Neutralizing. The Mighty One's tactical mind raced. He couldn't break the grip. The commando's strength was far beyond his ability to overcome. But he still had the comm unit, still had the downloaded data. Rex, he shouted into the transmitter. I'm compromised. Downloading to your position now. You need to. The commando's other hand crushed the comm unit, cutting off transmission. Sparks flew from the destroyed equipment, and the Mighty One felt something tear loose in his chest where the device had been attached. Pain, impossible pain for a plastic being. Shot through him. The Kaminoans rushed back into the laboratory, their large eyes widening at the scene. How did it get in here? Security sweep showed no intrusions. It doesn't matter, the other Kaminoan said, moving closer to examine the Mighty One. What is it? This isn't Republic technology. The construction is completely foreign. The commando held him up to the light, and the Mighty One stared back at the Kaminoans with defiance. He'd gotten the data out. The mission was accomplished. Whatever happened to him now was secondary. Fascinating, one Kaminoan said, reaching out with a long-fingered hand to manipulate the Mighty One's limbs. It appears to be some form of solid polymer construct. Articulated joints. Rudimentary cognitive processing. But it's not cybernetic. There's no power source, no circuitry. How is it functioning? I'm functioning because I'm alive, the Mighty One said, startling both Kaminoans with his response. And I've seen enough to know what you're planning. The Jedi will stop you. The Republic will. The Republic will do exactly what it's been designed to do, the first Kaminoan interrupted. Serve its purpose and then be transformed into something stronger. The Jedi are already obsolete, they simply don't know it yet. And this Republic they've sworn to protect will become an empire built on order and control. You're talking about genocide, the Mighty One said. Thousands of Jedi. Maybe tens of thousands. You'll murder them all with the army they trusted. We're talking about evolution, the Kaminoan corrected. The galaxy is changing. Those who cannot adapt will be removed. It's simply natural selection applied to galactic politics. The Mighty One had faced many threats in his existence, environmental disasters, territorial challenges, existential crises about the nature of his own being. But he'd never encountered something like this, evil that genuinely believed it was doing the right thing, monsters who saw their monstrous actions as necessary progress. Take it to the dissection laboratory, the second Kaminoan ordered. If we can determine how it functions without conventional technology, it might provide insights for future clone enhancements. The ability to operate without detectable energy signatures would be invaluable for infiltration units. The commando began carrying the Mighty One toward a door marked with ominous symbols. He struggled, but it was like fighting against a mountain. His plastic body, so durable against physical trauma, couldn't generate the force needed to break free. Then the laboratory's alarm klaxons wailed. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red. Security breach in the main facility. A voice boomed through the speakers. Multiple armed intruders. All security personnel respond. The Kaminoans looked at each other in alarm. The Jedi, one said. They know. They've come for their operative. Through the laboratory's viewport, the Mighty One could see the main facility across the kilometer of ocean platform. Explosions bloomed against its white walls. Blaster fire streaked through the rain. And he could make out tiny figures, clone troopers in blue and white armor, fighting alongside Jedi with glowing lightsabers. They were coming for him. These beings who barely knew him, who he'd only met weeks ago in a universe not his own, they were risking everything to save one small toy warrior. The commando's grip loosened slightly as it received new instructions through its neural implant. The Mighty One seized the opportunity. He twisted, got one arm free, and drove his plastic fist into the commando's eye with all the force he could muster. It shouldn't have worked. He had no enhanced strength, no special abilities. But the commando's enhanced aggression protocols had made it hypersensitive to pain stimulus, and the unexpected strike to the eye triggered a reflexive flinch. The Mighty One dropped, hit the floor rolling, and ran for the ventilation grate he'd entered through. Behind him, the Kaminoans shouted orders. The commando recovered and gave chase, each of its footsteps like thunder. But the Mighty One was small, fast, and motivated by the knowledge that everything. The Republic, the Jedi, the future of this entire galaxy, depended on the data he'd already transmitted, making it into the right hands. He dove into the ventilation shaft as the commando's hand smashed into the grate behind him. The entire duct shook with the impact, but the Mighty One was already scrambling deeper into the system, navigating by memory and instinct. He had to survive. Had to escape. Had to make sure the sacrifice of everyone risking their lives for him wasn't in vain. Behind him, he heard the commando begin tearing the ventilation system apart to reach him. Ahead, alarms and explosions suggested the facility was descending into chaos. And somewhere in that chaos, his unlikely allies were fighting their way toward him. The Mighty One kept running through the darkness, pursued by a manufactured killer, carrying information that could save or doom a galaxy. Just another day in the life of the universe's smallest soldier. The ventilation shaft buckled and tore behind him as the black armored commando ripped through durasteel like paper. The Mighty One didn't look back. Looking back in combat was how you died. He focused on the maze ahead, taking corners at full speed, his plastic feet finding purchase on metal that shook with each impact from his pursuer. Rain hammered against the facility's exterior. Through gaps in the ductwork, the Mighty One caught glimpses of the battle raging outside. Rex and the 501st trading fire with Kaminoan security forces, their blue-marked armor standing out against the white facility walls. Lightsabers carved brilliant arcs through the downpour as Anakin and Obi-Wan deflected blaster bolts, their forms moving with the supernatural grace the Mighty One had learned to recognize. They were fighting their way toward this building. Toward him. The shaft ended abruptly at an external vent. The Mighty One burst through the grating and found himself on the facility's rain-slicked exterior wall, 15 stories above the churning ocean. Wind buffeted him, strong enough to lift a being his size and hurl him into the sea. He pressed himself flat against the wall, searching for handholds. Behind him, metal screamed as the commando widened the ventilation opening. No time for careful climbing. The Mighty One spotted a maintenance cable running down the wall and jumped for it. His hands caught the cable and he slid, friction burning against his plastic palms despite their durability. The ground rushed up, 10 stories, 5, 2, and he let go, tucking into a roll that would have shattered bones in an organic being. His plastic construction absorbed the impact and he came up running. There. A Kaminoan security officer pointed from a nearby platform. The infiltrator. Neutralize it. Blaster fire ionized the rain around him. The Mighty One zigzagged, using his small size and the poor visibility to his advantage. A bolt scorched the platform centimeters from his feet. Another carved a smoking line across his shoulder, his first real injury since arriving in this galaxy, the plastic scarred but not penetrated. He dove behind a support column as more fire erupted. Trapped. No way forward. The commando would emerge from the building any second. Security forces approaching from both sides. In the yard, this would be the moment where Roxy suggested retreat, where Twig would panic, where Leaf would try to negotiate. But the Mighty One had always been the one who found the third option. He looked up. Overhead cables crisscrossed between platforms, carrying power and data throughout the facility. Too high for him to reach, but there, a stack of supply crates against the column, and above them, a maintenance ladder. The Mighty One climbed. Crate to crate, then onto the ladder's lowest rung. The metal was slick with rain and his hands struggled for grip, but he hauled himself upward with the same determination that had carried him through every impossible challenge. A blaster bolt struck the ladder below him, melting through a rung. The entire structure shuddered. The Mighty One kept climbing. He reached the top and jumped for the nearest cable. His hands closed around the thick conduit and he began traversing hand over hand, suspended above the battle. Below, clone troopers and Kaminoan security exchanged fire. Above, thunder rolled across Kamino's eternal storm. "I've got eyes on the target." A voice crackled through the chaos. Small object moving across the power cables, grid section 7. The Mighty One looked down to see Crosshair, the Bad Batch sharpshooter, positioned on a distant platform with his specialized rifle. For a terrible moment, he thought the clone was targeting him. Then Crosshair's rifle spat a bolt that took down a security officer who'd been tracking the Mighty One with a blaster. "Move it, Tiny." Crosshair's voice came through speakers the clones had set up across the battlefield. "We didn't come all this way to watch you take a swim." The Mighty One moved. The cable led toward a landing platform where he could see the familiar shape of a Republic shuttle, its engines already warming up. Safety. Extraction. Survival. Then the cable shook violently. The Mighty One looked back to see the black-armored commando climbing onto the cable behind him, moving with terrifying speed despite the precarious position. Enhanced strength. Enhanced agility. Enhanced everything designed to make the perfect killing machine. You have got to be kidding me, the Mighty One muttered, doubling his pace. The commando gained ground. Its hands closed around the cable in the same place the Mighty One's feet had been moments before. The gap between them shrank. 20 feet, 15, 10. Below, Wrecker's voice boomed across the battlefield. Someone shoot that thing. Negative. Tech's response was sharp. The commando's armor will deflect standard blaster fire. And if we damage the cable, we'll drop both targets into the ocean. The Mighty One's mind raced through tactical options. He couldn't outrun his pursuer. Couldn't fight something that could crush him with one hand. Couldn't call for help that wouldn't endanger everyone trying to save him. Which left one option. He stopped moving and turned to face the commando, still gripping the cable with both hands. What are you doing? Ahsoka's voice crackled from somewhere below, tinged with panic. Keep moving. The commando reached him, its hand extending to grab. The Mighty One looked up at the emotionless face, the dead eyes, the absolute certainty of a being that existed only to follow orders. You're not a person, the Mighty One said quietly. You're a weapon. And I feel sorry for you. Then he let go of the cable. He fell backward into the rain and wind, the commando's grabbing hand closing on empty air. For a heartbeat the world was just water and gravity and the terrible certainty of impact with the ocean 15 stories below. Then something caught him. The Mighty One found himself suspended in mid-air, wrapped in an invisible force that felt like a gentle hand. He looked down to see Anakin on a platform directly beneath his fall trajectory, one hand extended, his face tight with concentration as he used the force to arrest the descent. I've got you, Anakin called up through the rain. Just, stay still. The Mighty One didn't have much choice. He hung suspended as Anakin carefully lowered him toward the platform. Above, the black-armored commando stood on the cable, apparently calculating whether pursuing was worth the risk. Then Crosshair's rifle spoke again. The bolt struck the cable's support structure. The metal sparked, began to give way, and the commando's emotionless face showed its first expression, surprise. The cable snapped. The commando fell, plummeting into the churning ocean below. The Mighty One touched down on the platform as Anakin's force grip released him. The Jedi was breathing hard, rain streaming down his face. You jumped. You actually jumped off a cable 15 stories up. I knew you'd catch me, the Mighty One said, which was only partially true. He'd hoped Anakin would catch him. There was a difference. What if I hadn't been in position? Then I would have gotten wet. The Mighty One's painted features couldn't convey the relief flooding through him, but his voice carried it. The data, did Rex receive the transmission? Every byte, Obi-Wan said, appearing on the platform with Ahsoka close behind. Both Jedi looked exhausted, their robes scorched and torn. It's already being analyzed by the Council. What you found in there, it changes everything. Then this wasn't for nothing, the Mighty One said. The clones who died getting me out. No one died, Rex interrupted, climbing onto the platform with Cody and several 500 first troopers. We took casualties, but your intel gave us advance warning of the facility's defenses. We adapted. We survived. The Mighty One looked at the clone captain, seeing something new in his expression. These beings had just learned they were programmed weapons aimed at their friends. They'd discovered their entire existence was a lie built on betrayal and genetic slavery. And yet here they stood, having fought through enemy fire to rescue one small plastic warrior who'd given them the truth they needed. What happens now? The Mighty One asked. Now we get off this platform before Kaminoan reinforcements arrive, Anakin said, gesturing toward the waiting shuttle. And then we figure out how to stop a Sith Lord who controls both sides of a galactic war and has an army of pre-programmed assassins ready to execute every Jedi in existence. Is that all? The Mighty One said dryly. I thought you were going to give me a hard mission. Despite everything, the battle, the revelations, the sheer impossibility of their situation, several clones laughed. Even Obi-Wan's lips twitched toward a smile. They ran for the shuttle as blaster fire resumed behind them. The Bad Batch provided covering fire while Rex and Cody helped evacuate wounded troopers. Anakin and Obi-Wan deflected incoming bolts with their lightsabers, the blades humming through rain-thick air. The Mighty One rode in Rex's palm again, watching the chaos of extraction unfold around him. He'd come to this galaxy by accident, pulled through a dimensional rift while defending a backyard kingdom. Now he was part of something infinitely larger. A conspiracy that threatened to destroy an ancient order of peacekeepers and transform a republic into an empire. The shuttle's engines roared to life. The boarding ramp began to close. And as Kamino fell away beneath them, the Mighty One allowed himself one moment of existential reflection. He was a toy. A being created to be played with by children, given consciousness through mechanisms he didn't understand, and now carrying information that could determine the fate of trillions. The universe, he decided, had a twisted sense of humor. You did good work today, Rex said quietly, looking down at the small figure in his palm. Real soldier's work. I'm proud to serve alongside you. The Mighty One looked up at the clone's face, identical to millions of others genetically, but unique in expression and spirit. You're not weapons, he said firmly. You're brothers. You're warriors. You're people. And whatever programming they put in your heads, you're stronger than it. I hope you're right, Rex replied. Because when this war ends, however it ends, we're going to need every bit of that strength. The shuttle climbed through Kamino's atmosphere toward the Star Destroyer waiting in orbit. Behind them, the secret facility burned, its conspiracies exposed, its enhanced commandos scattered. But the Mighty One knew this victory was just one battle in a much larger war. The real fight, the one that would determine whether the Republic survived or fell to Sith manipulation, was only beginning. And somehow, impossibly, a toy warrior from another dimension stood at the center of it all. The Jedi Temple's council chamber had never felt more like a tomb. The Mighty One stood once again in its center, but this time the atmosphere was poisonous with tension. Every master present had seen the data he'd retrieved from Kamino. Every one of them now knew the terrible truth: they were leading an army designed to destroy them. Master Yoda sat with his eyes closed, his ancient face carved with grief. Master Windu's jaw was set like Durasteel, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The other council members showed varying degrees of shock, anger, and barely controlled fear. Verify the data, we must, Yoda said finally, his voice heavy. Too enormous, this conspiracy is. Too terrible to accept without certainty. The data has been verified, Obi-Wan replied from his position near the chamber's edge. Tech and our best Republic cryptographers have confirmed its authenticity. The financial records, the contingency orders, the connection to Palpatine, all of it is real. Then we arrest the Chancellor, Mace Windu said flatly. Immediately. We remove him from power and expose his connection to the Sith before he can activate Order 66. On what charges? Ki-Adi-Mundi asked. Financial records connecting him to shell corporations. He'll claim ignorance, produce falsified records, turn this back on us. We'll look like the conspirators attempting a military coup. Because that's exactly what it will be, Plo Koon added quietly. The moment we move against Palpatine without irrefutable proof, we become traitors to the Republic we've sworn to protect. The Senate will turn on us. The public will see Jedi attempting to overthrow democracy. The Mighty One listened to the debate spiral, recognizing a pattern he'd seen countless times in the yard when crisis struck. Everyone knew something had to be done. No one could agree on what. And while they argued, the threat grew stronger. "You're thinking too big," he said. The council members turned to look at him. In the weeks since his arrival, they'd grown accustomed to his presence, but interrupting their deliberations was still unusual. "Explain," Windu said, his tone suggesting this better be good. "You're trying to solve the entire problem at once," the Mighty One said, moving to where everyone could see him despite his size. "Expose Palpatine, remove the threat, prevent Order 66, save the Republic. But you can't do all of that simultaneously. You need to think tactically. Identify the immediate threat and neutralize it first." "The immediate threat is the Chancellor," Shak Ti said. "As long as he remains in power, he can activate Order 66 at any moment." "No," the Mighty One countered. "The immediate threat is the inhibitor chips. Palpatine can give the order, but without the chips, the clones can refuse it. They can choose. That's what you need to focus on first, giving your soldiers the ability to choose." Silence fell across the chamber as the council absorbed this. "Remove the chips," Anakin said slowly, understanding dawning. "From every clone. It would take months, maybe years, but—" "We don't have years," Obi-Wan interrupted. "The moment we start removing chips, Palpatine will know we've discovered his plan. He'll activate Order 66 immediately rather than risk losing his programmed army." "Then we don't remove them publicly," the Mighty One said. "We do it quietly. Secretly. Start with the clones you trust most. Rex. Cody. The Bad Batch. Build a network of free soldiers who can act independently when the order comes. By the time Palpatine realizes what's happening, you'll have enough troops loyal to the Jedi to mount a real defense." Yoda's eyes opened, sharp and considering. "Risky, this plan is. Depend on secrecy, it does. One mistake, one discovery, and doom us all it could." "Every plan is risky," the Mighty One replied. "But the alternative is waiting until Palpatine is ready to strike and hoping you can respond fast enough. That's not a plan. That's suicide." Mace Windu stood, pacing the chamber. "Even if we remove the chips from select clones, we still face the larger problem. Palpatine controls the Senate. He controls both sides of the war through his Separatist allies. He's maneuvered the Republic into a position where the Jedi are dependent on the clone army for survival. How do we fight that?" "You don't fight it head-on," the Mighty One said. "You undermine it. Expose the Separatist leadership's connection to the Sith. Show the galaxy that the war itself is a manipulation. Turn Palpatine's conspiracy against him." "Easier said than done," Ki-Adi-Mundi observed. "Count Dooku is the visible Separatist leader, and he won't simply confess to being a Sith Lord working for Palpatine." The Mighty One had been thinking about this problem since the extraction from Kamino. In the yard, when facing an enemy too powerful to defeat directly, you changed the battlefield. You created new variables. You forced them to react to you instead of executing their plan. "What if you didn't need Dooku to confess?" he asked. "What if you had evidence linking him directly to Palpatine? Communications. Financial transfers. Proof that the two of them have been coordinating the war from the beginning. Such evidence would be on Dooku's personal systems," Obi-Wan said. "Heavily encrypted and guarded by some of the most sophisticated security in the galaxy. No one could access it without Dooku knowing." "No one your size," the Mighty One corrected. "But I've already proven I can infiltrate facilities designed to be impenetrable. Get me to wherever Dooku keeps his personal files, and I'll get you the evidence you need." The chamber erupted in objections. "Absolutely not," Anakin said immediately. "Count Dooku is a Sith Lord. His fortress on Sereno is one of the most defended locations in Separatist space. This isn't like Raxus or Kamino. If you're discovered, you're dead." "I might be dead anyway," the Mighty One shot back. "We all might be. At least this way I'm doing something about it instead of waiting for the galaxy to collapse around us." The small one speaks with warrior's wisdom, Yoda said softly. But worry for his safety, we do. Send him into darkness, should we? Risk his life for information we might obtain through other means. What other means? The Mighty One challenged. Master Yoda, I respect you. I respect all of you. But I've watched you debate for hours and the only concrete action suggested is my plan to remove the inhibitor chips. Everything else is caution and fear disguised as wisdom. Sometimes the only path forward is the dangerous one. Mace Windu's expression was unreadable. You sound like a Jedi facing the dark side. Confident. Certain. Willing to sacrifice everything for the mission. That confidence can be a strength or a fatal flaw. Then let it be my flaw, the Mighty One said. Not yours. Not the Jedi's. I'm offering to do this because I can. Because I'm outside your systems of control, outside the Force, outside everything Palpatine has planned for. I'm a variable he doesn't know exists. That makes me your best weapon. The council exchanged glances, their expressions troubled. Finally, Yoda spoke. Agree to this mission, I do not. But prevent you, I cannot. Your choice, it is. Your risk to take. But alone, you will not go. Protection, you will have. Support from the shadows. I'll take whatever help you're offering, the Mighty One said. But we need to move fast. Every day we wait is another day Palpatine gets closer to activating his endgame. 72 hours later, the Mighty One crouched in the cargo hold of a smuggler's ship approaching Sereno. The vessel was piloted by someone Obi-Wan called an old friend, a scruffy-looking Corellian named Han Solo who asked too many questions and made too many jokes about carrying the galaxy's tiniest commando. Anakin and Ahsoka were aboard as well, hidden in concealed compartments. The plan was simple. Solo would deliver supplies to one of Dooku's estates, the Mighty One would infiltrate during the delivery, and the Jedi would provide extraction if things went wrong. When, not if, Rex had corrected during the briefing. When things went wrong. The ship shuddered as it entered Sereno's atmosphere. Through the viewport, the Mighty One could see the planet's surface. Lush forests, elegant cities, and dominating it all, Dooku's fortress palace carved into a mountainside like a monument to aristocratic power. 10 minutes to landing, Solo called back. You sure about this, Tiny? Dooku's not exactly known for his hospitality. I'm sure, the Mighty One replied, checking his equipment. A new communicator, more durable than the last. A miniature recording device. A small thermal charge, insurance in case he needed to create a distraction. Just make sure you're ready for a quick exit when I signal. The ship descended toward the palace's landing platform. As they touched down, the Mighty One felt the familiar pre-mission focus settle over him. Every sense heightened. Every tactical consideration crystallized into simple clarity. This was it. The mission that would either expose Palpatine's conspiracy or get him killed trying. The cargo ramp lowered. Dooku's security droids began their inspection. And the Mighty One slipped out through a drainage port, dropping into the palace's infrastructure like a ghost made of plastic. He was inside. The palace's interior was elegant and dangerous, polished stone floors, priceless art on the walls, and security sensors at every junction. But the Mighty One had learned to read these systems during his time with Republic intelligence. He knew which sensors detected mass, which detected heat, which detected electrical signatures. He slipped past them all, being too small to trigger mass sensors, with no heat signature to detect, generating no electrical fields to alarm the security grid. He navigated by a map Obi-Wan had provided, incomplete and outdated, but better than nothing. Dooku's personal study was 3 levels up, in the palace's western tower. That's where the Count kept his most sensitive files, protected by encryption and physical security designed to stop even Jedi infiltrators. But not, the Mighty One hoped, designed to stop something the size of a toy. He climbed maintenance shafts and traversed ventilation ducts, moving through the palace's hidden arteries. Twice he had to freeze as security patrols passed below. Once, a protocol droid nearly spotted him, its photoreceptors scanning right past his position. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 30 minutes, he reached the study's ventilation grate. Below, Count Dooku sat at his desk, his elegant features illuminated by holographic displays. The Sith Lord was alone, reviewing what appeared to be battle reports from the Outer Rim. His lightsaber lay on the desk within easy reach, its curved hilt distinctive. The Mighty One waited. Patience was a weapon he'd mastered long ago. Wait for the right moment. Strike when the enemy was vulnerable. Dooku stood, moving toward a bookshelf on the far wall. The moment his back was turned, the Mighty One dropped from the vent and ran for the desk. The computer terminal was active, files open. The Mighty One plugged in his data extraction device and began downloading everything. Communications, financial records, strategic planning documents. The progress bar crawled forward with agonizing slowness. 50%. 60%. Behind him, Dooku spoke. I know you're there. The Mighty One's plastic form went rigid. Slowly, he turned to find the Count facing him, one hand extended. But not attacking. Just, watching. Fascinating, Dooku said, his cultured voice filled with genuine curiosity. The Force cannot perceive you, yet you exist. You act with intelligence and purpose. What are you? The download hit 75%. The Mighty One needed to buy time. I'm someone who knows what you're planning. The inhibitor chips. Order 66. Your partnership with Palpatine. All of it. Dooku's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Indeed. And what exactly do you think you know about my arrangements? I know you're working with a Sith Lord who's playing both sides of this war. I know you're helping him build an empire on the corpse of the Republic. I know you think you'll have a place in that empire, but you're wrong. Sith Lords don't share power. They use people and discard them. The download hit 90%. Dooku moved closer, his movements predator graceful. Philosophical insights from something no larger than a child's plaything. The galaxy grows strange indeed. Tell me, who sent you? The Jedi? They must be desperate if they're employing, whatever you are. They didn't send me, the Mighty One lied. I came on my own. Because I've seen what happens when people like you win. Tyranny. Oppression. The strong crushing the weak forever. I've fought against that my entire existence, and I'll fight it here too. 100%. Download complete. The Mighty One grabbed the data device and ran for the ventilation shaft. Behind him, Dooku's hand raised and the furniture in the room began to lift into the air, the Force being used with terrifying power. But the Force couldn't touch the Mighty One. Chairs and desks flew around him as he ran, crashing into walls, but he remained untouched by the telekinetic storm. Impossible. Dooku's composure cracked. Nothing escapes the Force. Nothing. The Mighty One reached the vent and dove inside just as Dooku's lightsaber ignited, its crimson blade carving through the air where he'd been a heartbeat before. He ran through the ductwork as the palace's alarms began to wail. Behind him, he could hear Dooku shouting orders to security forces. The entire palace was being locked down. But the Mighty One had the data. The evidence. The proof that would expose Palpatine's conspiracy. Now he just had to survive long enough to deliver it. He activated his communicator. Solo. I'm coming in hot. Get the engines ready. Already warming them up, the pilot's voice crackled back. Where are you? Heading for the landing platform. ETA 2 minutes. Don't leave without me. Wasn't planning on it. Much. The Mighty One burst from a ground-level vent and sprinted across the palace courtyard. Behind him, security droids poured from every entrance, their blasters tracking his small, fast-moving form. Ahead, Solo's ship sat on the platform, engines already glowing with pre-flight energy. The cargo ramp was down. Anakin stood at its base, lightsaber ignited, deflecting blaster bolts. "Run!" the Jedi shouted unnecessarily. The Mighty One ran. 50 meters. 40. 30. A blast struck the ground beside him, throwing up debris. Another scorched past his head. He didn't slow down. 20 meters. 10. He jumped for the ramp and Anakin's force-assisted catch pulled him the final distance. The moment his plastic feet touched the deck, the ramp began closing. "Go!" Anakin shouted toward the cockpit. The ship lifted off, blaster fire sparking against its shields. Through the closing ramp, the Mighty One caught one final glimpse of Dooku emerging from the palace, his face twisted with fury. Then they were airborne, climbing toward space, leaving Sereno behind. The Mighty One collapsed against the cargo hold's wall, clutching the data device. He'd done it. Against impossible odds, against a Sith Lord in his own fortress, he'd stolen the evidence that could save the Republic. Ahsoka knelt beside him, her face flushed with relief and adrenaline. "That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I've seen Anakin make a lot of crazy plans. It worked, didn't it?" The Mighty One managed. "It worked," she agreed. "But next time, maybe give us more than 2 minutes warning before you trigger every alarm in a Sith fortress." "I'll take it under advisement," the Mighty One said. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Separatist Count and his fortress far behind, the Mighty One allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The war wasn't over. The threat wasn't eliminated. But for the first time since discovering Palpatine's conspiracy, they had a weapon to fight back with. And they had it because a toy from another dimension had proven that courage and determination could overcome even the dark side of the Force. The Galactic Senate chamber held 10,000 voices, and every single one of them was screaming. The Mighty One watched from a concealed position in the Senate's observation gallery, standing beside a holoprojector that had just broadcast the evidence he'd stolen from Dooku's palace across every screen in the chamber. Communications between Palpatine and Dooku. Financial records showing the Chancellor secretly funding Separatist operations. Strategic plans coordinated between both sides of the war. And most damning of all, a holographic recording of Palpatine and Dooku discussing Order 66, referring to each other as Lord Sidious and Lord Tyrannus. The evidence was irrefutable. The conspiracy was exposed. And the galaxy was tearing itself apart trying to process it. Order. Order. The Senate Speaker, not Palpatine, who had been placed under emergency detention by the Jedi Council an hour before, hammered his gavel uselessly against the podium. "Senators, please. We must maintain decorum." But decorum was dead. Some senators demanded immediate elections. Others called for the Jedi to assume emergency powers. A few, the ones likely in Palpatine's pocket, claimed the evidence was fabricated, a Jedi coup disguised as revelation. Below in the Senate's central platform, Master Windu stood with Yoda, Obi-Wan, and a contingent of Jedi Knights. Their lightsabers remained unignited, but their presence was a clear statement: the Jedi would enforce order if necessary. "This is chaos," Anakin muttered from his position beside the Mighty One. "Half the Senate wants to execute Palpatine immediately. The other half thinks we're the traitors." "Chaos is what happens when comfortable lies get destroyed," the Mighty One replied. "They'll adapt. Or they won't. Either way, the truth is out." At significant cost, Obi-Wan added via comlink, his voice tight with strain. "We've discovered that Palpatine activated a partial version of Order 66 the moment we placed him in detention. Several clones across the galaxy attacked their Jedi commanders before we could transmit the override codes. The Mighty One felt something cold settle in his chest. How many? 12 Jedi dead. 23 wounded. But it could have been thousands if we hadn't removed the inhibitor chips from our most trusted clone units. Rex's network held. The 501st, the 212th, the Bad Batch, all remained loyal. They're currently helping to subdue clone units still under chip control. Small mercies, the Mighty One thought. 12 dead Jedi was a tragedy, but it was infinitely better than the genocide Palpatine had planned. In the Senate chamber below, Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan had taken the central platform, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. My fellow senators. We face an unprecedented crisis. The Supreme Chancellor, our elected leader, has been revealed as a Sith Lord who manipulated us into a war designed to destroy the Jedi Order and transform our Republic into a Sith Empire. Alleged Sith Lord. Senator Orn Free Taa of Ryloth shouted back. The evidence could be fabricated. The Jedi have motive to. The evidence has been verified by a dozen independent cryptographers. Organa shot back. The communication signatures are authentic. The financial records match Senate banking files. And more than that. He gestured toward the observation gallery where the Mighty One stood. The being who retrieved this evidence has no affiliation with the Republic, no loyalty to the Jedi, and no reason to fabricate anything. He's an independent party who risked his life to expose a conspiracy that threatened every democracy in the galaxy. 10,000 eyes turned toward the observation gallery. The Mighty One felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. In the yard, being noticed by the humans was dangerous. Here, being noticed might be the only thing keeping him alive. Show yourself. Someone in the Senate crowd demanded. If this mysterious operative exists, let us see him. Anakin placed his hand down near the railing, palm up. Your moment, soldier. Time to face the audience. The Mighty One climbed onto Anakin's palm and let the Jedi raise him into full view of the Senate. A massive holographic projection activated, magnifying his small form so every senator could see him clearly. Silence fell across the chamber. 10,000 beings stared at the tiny plastic warrior standing in a Jedi's palm. That's it. Senator Taa's voice dripped with disbelief. That's the great operative. Some kind of toy. I am a toy, the Mighty One said, his voice amplified by the gallery's speakers. I was created to be played with by children in a universe far from yours. I didn't ask to be pulled into your galaxy. I didn't ask to become part of your war. But when I discovered a conspiracy to commit genocide against an entire order of peacekeepers and transform your democracy into a tyranny, I chose to act. Not because I'm a hero. Not because I'm special. But because it was the right thing to do. The chamber remained silent, absorbing his words. I've spent the last several weeks learning about your galaxy, the Mighty One continued. Your conflicts. Your factions. Your endless debates about what's legal versus what's right. And I've watched you struggle with a simple truth. Sometimes the only way to preserve what's good is to fight against what's evil, even when that fight is difficult, dangerous, or unpopular. He gestured toward the evidence still displayed on the Senate screens. Chancellor Palpatine, Lord Sidious, spent years manipulating both sides of your war. He created the Separatist crisis. He engineered the clone army with built-in programming to murder Jedi on command. He positioned himself to become an emperor ruling over the ashes of your republic. And he almost succeeded because too many of you were too comfortable, too trusting, or too afraid to question authority. Senator Organa's voice was quiet but carried across the chamber. What would you have us do? Learn, the Mighty One said simply. Learn that democracy requires constant vigilance. Learn that power always seeks to expand and must be constantly checked. Learn that manufactured armies with inhibitor chips in their brains are slaves, not soldiers, and that any system built on slavery will inevitably corrupt itself. And most importantly, his voice hardened. Learn to listen when someone risks everything to warn you of danger, even if that someone is a 4-inch tall plastic warrior from another dimension who doesn't fit your expectations of what a hero should look like. The silence stretched. Then, from somewhere in the Senate crowd, a single senator began to clap. Another joined. Then another. Within moments, a wave of applause rolled through the chamber, not universal, but substantial. Enough to matter. Senator Organa turned to address the full Senate. I move that we establish an emergency tribunal to investigate all evidence related to the Palpatine conspiracy. I further move that we hold immediate elections for a new Supreme Chancellor under Jedi supervision to ensure the integrity of the process. And finally, he looked up at the Mighty One. I move that we grant full Republic citizenship and honors to the operative who exposed this conspiracy, regardless of his unusual origin. The vote was contentious, loud, and chaotic. But when the tallies came in, all three motions passed. Palpatine would face trial. The Republic would rebuild. And the Mighty One, a toy from another dimension, was now officially a citizen of the Galactic Republic with full legal rights and protections. As Anakin lowered him from public view and the Senate dissolved into committees and emergency sessions, the Mighty One felt something he hadn't experienced since arriving in this galaxy: hope. 3 weeks later, the Mighty One stood on a landing platform at the Jedi Temple, watching the twin suns of Tatooine set on the distant horizon visible through the atmospheric haze. Beside him, Rex and several other clone troopers who'd had their inhibitor chips removed stood at ease, no longer slaves to programming but free beings capable of choice. The trial's going well, Rex said. Palpatine's trying to claim the evidence was fabricated, but between Dooku's records and testimony from the Kaminoans we captured, he's finished. The Senate's already calling for execution. Will they go through with it? The Mighty One asked. Probably. The Republic doesn't have much tolerance for Sith Lords who commit treason. Rex paused. What about you? What's next for the galaxy's smallest hero? The Mighty One had been wrestling with that question since the Senate hearing. The Jedi had offered him permanent quarters at the temple. Republic intelligence wanted to recruit him for special operations. Senator Organa had suggested he serve as an advisor on post-war reconstruction. But none of those paths felt quite right. I've been thinking about the clones, the Mighty One said. The ones still fighting this war, still serving despite learning they were created as weapons. They're going to need advocates. People who understand what it means to be a manufactured being searching for purpose beyond what you were designed for. Rex looked down at him with something that might have been respect. You're talking about clone rights legislation. I'm talking about making sure beings created as property become recognized as people. With rights. With choices. With futures that aren't dictated by their origins. The Mighty One's voice carried conviction born from personal experience. I know what it's like to question whether you're real or just playing a role someone else scripted. Your brothers deserve better than that. It'll be a hard fight, Rex warned. The Senate's already debating what to do with 3 million clone troopers now that the war's ending. Some want to decommission them. Others want to integrate them into a new Republic military. Very few are talking about actually giving them citizenship and autonomy. Then it's a good thing I've gotten experienced at hard fights, the Mighty One replied. Behind them, Ahsoka approached with Anakin. The young Padawan carried something small and carefully wrapped. We have something for you, she said, kneeling down to the Mighty One's level. The Council approved it. Well, most of the Council. Master Windu abstained on principle. She unwrapped the package to reveal a miniature lightsaber, scaled perfectly for someone the Mighty One's size. The hilt was carved from rare woods, and when activated, it projected a blade of brilliant blue energy barely 6 inches long. We can't teach you to use the Force, Anakin explained. But we can give you a weapon worthy of the warrior you've proven yourself to be. Tech from the Bad Batch helped design the power cell. It should last for years of regular use. The Mighty One took the weapon, feeling its weight, perfectly balanced for his plastic hands. He activated it experimentally, and the blade hummed to life with a sound that resonated in his chest. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Say you'll keep fighting for what's right," Ahsoka replied. "Say you'll keep being the conscience this galaxy needs. Say you'll remind us that size doesn't determine significance and that being created for one purpose doesn't mean you can't choose another." The Mighty One deactivated the lightsaber and clipped it to his side, a warrior now truly armed. "I can do that." As the suns continued their descent and Coruscant city lights began to glow in the gathering darkness, the Mighty One thought about the journey that had brought him here. Pulled from a backyard universe into galactic war. From defending territories measured in feet to influencing politics across star systems. From a toy questioning his own reality to a recognized citizen fighting for the rights of other manufactured beings. The Force might not touch him. He might never understand the mystical energy that bound this galaxy together. But he'd learned something perhaps more important, that courage, determination, and unwavering commitment to doing what's right could accomplish things that even the Force could not. In the distance, a transport ship lifted off carrying the first group of clones being relocated to colony worlds where they could build new lives free from military service. More would follow in the coming months and years as the Republic slowly transformed from a war machine back into a democracy. It wouldn't be perfect. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, corruption, and countless battles yet to fight. But that was fine. The Mighty One had never expected easy. He'd only ever expected to do his part, fight his battles, and leave the galaxy a little better than he'd found it. And looking out at the transformation already beginning, clones gaining freedom, Sith conspiracies exposed, democracy preserved, he thought maybe, just maybe, he'd accomplished exactly that. Rex's hand descended, palm up. "Coming, sir. There's a strategy session about clone resettlement legislation. Senator Organa specifically requested your input." The Mighty One climbed onto the clone's palm, his new lightsaber secure at his side. "Let's not keep them waiting. We've got work to do." As they walked back into the temple, the Mighty One allowed himself one final thought about the yard he'd left behind. About Roxy, Twig, Leaf, and the simple existence he'd known before this impossible journey began. He hoped they were okay. Hoped they'd found their own adventures. Hoped that somewhere across the dimensional void, they knew that their leader had become something even greater than the hero he'd pretended to be in their backyard kingdom. He'd become the real thing. And that, the Mighty One decided, was the greatest triumph of all. The Mighty One's legend spread across the galaxy in the years that followed. Holonet broadcasts told the story of the tiny warrior who'd exposed the greatest conspiracy in Republic history. Children played with action figures made in his image, though he found that particular irony deeply amusing. And in the Senate chambers where clone rights legislation was debated, his voice carried weight far beyond his physical size. He never returned to his original universe. The dimensional rift that brought him to this galaxy had been a once-in-eternity cosmic accident, impossible to replicate or reverse. But the Mighty One found he didn't mind. The yard had been his world, but this galaxy had become his purpose. He worked alongside Rex and the freed clones to build communities where manufactured beings could choose their own destinies. He advised the new Chancellor, Senator Organa, elected in a landslide after Palpatine's execution, on matters of individual rights and democratic protection. And on quiet nights, he would stand at the temple's highest spire and look up at the stars, wondering what other impossible things might be falling through the cracks between realities. The Force remained beyond his perception, that mystical energy forever outside his plastic existence. But he'd learned that not everything worth fighting for could be touched, seen, or understood. Some things, justice, courage, the unshakable belief that every being deserved freedom and choice, transcended even the cosmic power that bound galaxies together. In the end, the Mighty One had proven something that would echo through Star Wars history for generations, that heroism wasn't measured in size, power, or connection to ancient mystical forces. It was measured in the willingness to stand up when standing up was hardest, to fight when fighting seemed impossible, and to believe that one small voice raised in defense of what's right could change everything. The galaxy far, far away would never forget the warrior who'd been small enough to slip through every defense, brave enough to face Sith lords and conspiracies, and powerful enough, not in the Force, but in spirit, to save democracy itself. And somewhere in the Force, or perhaps in whatever energy-governed beings like him who existed outside its touch, the Mighty One's story became exactly what he'd always been, a legend that proved size didn't matter when your courage was infinite.